Welcome to the IRL stream. We're going to give it just a couple of minutes before we really get cranking here because I want some folks to have the opportunity to start to file in. And then we will we'll get cranking on our 4 Beers, 4 Brewers, Episode 1 IRL stream. So I'm actually pretty excited about this because I'm a huge beer fan. Really like craft beers. So what I'm doing today is highlighting 4 beers from 4 separate breweries, and these are all beers that I would recommend to anybody. Now you can just see, as we're sitting here, you can compare things like color, clarity, the appropriate head on each of these beers, and you can kind of see how they differ in that capacity. Let me just say this, I know we got a couple of mods that are probably going to be around here. I think Batman Shampoo. I think also No Time to Disclaim is going to be in here as well. I'm sitting a little bit further away from the screen, so I don't have internet right now, so nor do we really have power. It's like kind of spotty right now, so because of the big windstorm that we had. So anyway, so if you guys can do me a favor, sit a little bit further away from the screen. I can't have it up on a laptop and monitor chat. So to see chat, I kind of have to get all up in your face. So yeah. So anyways, so if things like new subs pop up in the feed in the meantime, and we need to shout those out, please just hype it up for me in chat, and then I'll just see all this hype, and I'll be able to lean in and be like, oh yeah, thank you so much, so and so for dropping that subbage. Yeah. You can't see anything crazy that I post. If I lean in, I can see it, brother. So, anyways. Alright, so we got 20, a little over 20 people here right now. Welcome to the stream, everybody. I think we're going to get cranking. I'd really love to get started on these brews because I'm thirsty. And having some world-class beers in front of me gets me all hot and bothered. So I'm excited to dive into these. So let's do it. Welcome to 4 Beers, 4 Breweries. Here's the basic outline for the stream today. Here's what I'm going to be doing. So I've got these 4 different beers I'm going to highlight. I'm going to talk about each and every one of them. We're going to go down the list. I'll tell you what brewer made the beer. I'll tell you a little bit about the beer itself, what kind of a beer it is, what the sort of description, the commercial description for the beer is. We'll tell you things like the ABV, the alcohol by volume for each beer, and then we'll tell you a little bit about the brewer, and then we'll drink it. So that's kind of how we're doing this. So if you're taking notes for your own personal purposes, you want to try these beers later, maybe rewatch the stream and kind of taste along with us. I'm going to go ahead and give you the list of beers that we've got today. Okay, so starting from my left to right. We have, this is Dragon's Milk by New Holland Brewing Company. Dragon's Milk from New Holland Brewing Company. Next we have Oberon. This is a summer beer made by Bell's Brewery. Bell's Brewing. So, there's that. This here is the family-friendly stream, I know, but this is the name of the beer, so I'm going to say it, okay? It's not a swear word, but it's kind of a sketchy word, but it's called Dirty Bastard, okay? Dirty Bastard. And that is that's a Scotch ale by Founders Brewing Company. Last on the list, again, it's a great beer. The name sounds bad, but it's not bad, okay? So this is a brewery called Brewery Vivant, okay? Brewery Vivant, they're relatively young in the grand scheme of things here in Grand Rapids, and their emblem is a rooster. Another word for a rooster is C-O-Q, cock. So I know it sounds dirty. So this is their big red cock, okay? I know. Laugh it up, everybody, because we're middle schoolers at heart, aren't we? This is a hoppy Belgian-American red ale, okay? Hoppy Belgian-American red ale. And I picked it because it's one of their staples. It's a fantastic beer, and it's really interesting, though, and we'll talk about Brewery Vivant when we get to this beer. But what they do is they tend to mix and match some interesting styles of beer in their brewing process. So they're very innovative in the way that they create their beers. Similar to the ways that I would relate them to Avery. Avery Brewing in Colorado. So they're very similar in their brewing styles. A little bit adventurous. They like to mix and match some different styles. They don't necessarily stay between the lines when it comes to the way they brew. So sometimes that works really well. Some of the beers end up a little bit strange because of that, but that's okay. They have their own character. This is the ones that they mix some styles and it comes out really, really well. So we'll talk about each of these individually as we go down the line. So we're going to start here on my left with New Holland Brewing Company. This is Dragon's Milk. So I've got some notes here because I don't want to miss anything. So I've kind of outlined everything. So pardon me if I kind of look down on my notes just to stay on track because I have a tendency to ramble. I ramble on a lot. So this is more for me to stay on track as we go through these beers. So this is New Holland Brewing Company. This is Dragon's Milk. Let me go ahead and I'll show you the label so that when you're out at the store and you're like, hey, I remember him talking about Dragon's Milk, but I don't know what it looks like because I'm a very visual person. So I'm going to show you the label on each of these beers. This is the Dragon's Milk. I think it's mirrored for you, and for that I apologize. But it's got a sweet dragon on it, kind of with the like a light in the background shining down. It's a black and orange label from New Holland Brewing Company. Okay, that's the Dragon's Milk. Now, Dragon's Milk on Beer Advocate is rated at 89, which they have a scale to 100, and they're very strict on it. Okay, so Beer Advocate comes out at an 89, which is very good. That is the very top number in the very good category. Once you get to the 90, once you get to the score of 90 and above, that's technically an outstanding beer. This is at the very top of the very good scale, so you cannot go wrong with the Dragon's Milk. This is an American Double Imperial Stout. It's aged in oak barrels. Okay, so this is an oak barrel I can do this. Trust me. I have not been drinking yet. Okay, oak barrel aged Imperial Stout. It's very, very good. So let me give you the commercial description that's used to describe this beer. This is in quotations. Okay. Barrel-aged Imperial Stout with a roasty malt character intermingled with deep vanilla tones, all dancing in an oak bath. Okay. Now I lined all these beers up for you because I wanted you to be able to see color, clarity, and head. So these are all different colors. The Dragon's Milk is a dark, rich, kind of blackish brown color. The Oberon is, this is a wheat ale. It's a summery wheat ale. So you see that the color is much more yellow. And it's just it's a fuzz cloudy as well. Next to that, you have the Founder's Dirty Bastard. And this is a sort of brownish red and high in the clarity specter of things with a nice little head on it. And then lastly, you can see the Big Red Coq by Brewery Vanguard, which is also sort of this orangish red. So you can see the color. Let me hold the Dragon's Milk up close so you can really see that small little head on it. Yum, yum, yum. Clip it again, clip it again. I know, guys. Grow up! So here you have our nice 11% ABV. So anything that, if you're not familiar with beers, maybe you're sort of young when it comes to your experience with craft beers, when you get into 10% and above, these beers have a little bit of heft to them. They don't always taste like they're 10% and above. I've had things upwards of 18% before, and that that was the 18% I had was a porter made that I had on tap. You couldn't get it in a bottle. You could only have it on tap in-house at Avery Brewing out in Boulder, Colorado. Oh my goodness, it knocked my socks off. It's delicious. But anything that's 10% and above is going to have a little bit of heft to it. So you may want to have these after you've eaten something. I always tell people especially if you're going to be doing flights or you're going to be drinking a few different beers. I personally like to stay as sober as possible while enjoying my beers. I think that the more tipsy to drunk that you get as you drink, the less you can really appreciate the beers, and that's not my thing. I don't really enjoy that. I want to be sober enough that I can really look at the beer, understand the description, understand the flavor, and the process that goes into brewing each and every one of these. So if you're gonna have a number of beers, or if you're gonna have anything that's 10% and above, definitely have water with it and food. So after you've eaten, you want to have food in your tummy, and you want to have water in between brews. That's gonna help keep you on the low end of things and for me personally, I'm a family guy, so I tend to have to do driving afterwards. So I don't like to get anywhere close to tipsy or anything like that. So I try to keep things nice and tempered. So that's my advice for you. So this is an 11% ABV Dragon's Milk. It's extremely delicious. Let me tell you a little bit about the brewer before we taste it. New Holland Brewing Company, okay? They are centered in Holland, Michigan. So if you're not familiar with Holland, Michigan, it's a sort of on a vacation area around here. People love to go to Holland. It's a beach town, and they've got a really great culture there. So if you're ever in West Michigan and you want to go to someplace that has some character to it, but you don't necessarily want to go all the way up to the Upper Peninsula near Canada, well, you can go to Holland. Holland, Michigan is sort of in the middle of the state in terms of north to south. And it's on the west coast, right on Lake Michigan. It's a beach town, and they have some lovely beaches there in Holland, and a great culture, some wonderful little shops and stuff in the downtown area. You can just walk up and down the main street, and it's got brick roads, lovely storefronts, all local places, not a lot of chains down there. It's a beautiful, beautiful city, or I would say town. So lots of character, and right there on Main Street is New Holland Brewing Company's facility, where they serve and even do some distilling on site. So New Holland Brewing Company, it's right there downtown, beautiful area. They've got a great restaurant. My wife and I have gone there a number of times, even for one of our anniversaries. We went and had dinner there. They've got great food. They actually have great pizza as well. The goat cheese and the pizza is a must. I highly recommend it. New Holland Brewing Company, you won't regret it if you ever decide to go and visit. Now, they did open a distillery a few years back too to add to their repertoire. So now they distill whiskey, rum, and gin, as well as doing brewing. So great food, great brews. They use a lot of local ingredients. In fact, they grow some of their own vegetables in-house. They have a small little greenhouse area where they grow some of their own ingredients. Fantastic. They were opened in 1996. They've recently expanded just in the last couple of years and opened up a new facility in downtown Grand Rapids called the Knickerbocker, with some phenomenal food. You have to go to this. If you're ever in Grand Rapids, I highly recommend you take the time to go to the Knickerbocker as well. The facility is stunningly beautiful, and as a guy, you just walk in there and you're like, oh, it's like heaven. Okay, so the lighting fixtures that are hanging from the ceilings, these huge vaulted ceilings, and the lighting fixtures are actually bourbon barrels. They're bourbon barrels that they've turned into lighting fixtures, like lanterns that hang from the ceiling. It's super cool, super cool. So my wife and I have gone to the Knickerbocker a couple of times, and they have lots of like exotic cheeses, which isn't really my thing. I thought it was interesting. We got a cheese platter, and I didn't even know most of the cheeses on it. Some of them tasted like dirty socks to me, but I know that a lot of people absolutely love exotic cheeses and that whole culture, and pairing those with alcoholic beverages. I don't really have a tongue for it. I don't know. I haven't developed the palate for cheeses, but apparently a lot of people really rave about it. But I really like some of their roasted vegetables, some of their homegrown vegetables. They had this incredible roasted cauliflower dish. It was super well seasoned. I actually ended up liking the cauliflower side dish more than my entree. It was fantastic. So Knickerbocker is the next facility that they open in downtown Grand Rapids. So without further ado, let's try the Dragon's Milk. I did actually tweet out a list of these beers. I know it's a little bit close to go time, so you may not have had time to run out and grab a couple of these, or maybe you had one in your fridge. But the next time I do this, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make sure that the list of beers is published well in advance, so that if you'd like, you can sit down with me and you can have your own flight set up, and you can go through these with me. We'll taste them together and kind of talk about how they taste and how we enjoy them. So here we go. We're going to go with our barrel-aged Dragon's Milk. It's very, very creamy, but it finishes pretty complex. And these imperial stouts, they have that sort of characteristic at the end that almost has a licoricey liquor kind of a flavor to it. I don't know how to describe it really well for you, but it sits with you very, very nicely. It's one of those things that you sip it and the flavor just kind of goes away. It kind of hangs out for a little while in your mouth. So very, very good beer. But this is the kind of beer that's got some heft to it. So if you're really going for a nice complexity in your beer, and you really want to appreciate that, and you want to let it sit with you for a while, you're really going to enjoy this. But if you want to have something that's a little bit more drinkable, maybe you're like, I don't really want to feel it. I don't necessarily want to have something with some heft. But I just want something that's really summery, very drinkable. Maybe you can have it as you're sitting by the pool. Maybe you're having it as you're sitting on the beach. Maybe something that you're grilling out with your friends. There is a local beer here in Michigan that is fantastic. Hey Brooks, I see you, brother, in chat. Chug. I'm not trying to get smashed on stream, guys, alright? Okay? So, Dragon's Milk, done. Moving on. This is the one that's super drinkable. It's a summer beer. This is called Oberon. I'm going to hold it up for you so you can see color, you can see clarity. And don't be alarmed. Some people are alarmed by this, but they pick up an Oberon and they look at it and they're like, why are there floaties in my beer? Why are there floaties in my beer? They are very, very conservative with their filtering with the Oberon. So you may, when you shake it up, you may see a little bit of things kind of floating around and settling on the bottom. That's perfectly normal. You're going to have that in an Oberon. It's one of the things that gives it some character. It's not going to hurt you. You're not even going to notice it as you're drinking the beer. You're not going to feel floaties. There's no mouthfeel from it at all. It's just kind of this weedy residue that's sort of in the beer. So don't be alarmed by that. Nothing's wrong with your beer if you see it. Okay? So this is the Oberon. Let's talk about Oberon for a little bit here. So Oberon is made by Bell's Brewing Company. Beer Advocate gives this particular wheat ale an 86 on their scale, which is in the very good category of beers. So it's labeled as very good by Beer Advocate. This is an American Pale Wheat Ale. All right, American Pale Wheat Ale. Okay? So this is, I'm going to give you the commercial description that's used to describe Oberon. Sorry, I'm burping because this is carbonated. Okay, so this is the commercial description. Oberon is a wheat ale fermented with Bell's signature house ale yeast, mixing a spicy hop character with mildly fruity aromas. The addition of wheat malt adds a smooth mouthfeel, making it a classic summer beer. And it is. Sound off in chat if you've ever seen or tried Oberon. It's very, very popular. This is not something that's under the radar that you're going to have a hard time finding. You're not going to have a hard time finding this in the summer at all. It's a very popular summer beer. Let me show you the label on this, because I know, again, people sometimes they hear about these beers, they want to go find them, but they're very visual people. They don't want to have to go and read through all the labels, okay? This is what you're looking for if you're going for Oberon. A very distinctive, very summery label here with that sort of yellowish orange and blue. It says Oberon right across the front with the sun in the blue sky as their label. So that's Oberon. Now they have a couple of different facilities. So they have their main brewing facility now is in Comstock, Michigan, but their headquarters were in Kalamazoo. So Kalamazoo is just south of Grand Rapids by about 45-minute drive, just straight down the highway to Kalamazoo. It's not a beach town, it's inland quite a ways, but it has its own feel, it has its own character. I've had some friends from Kalamazoo when I went to college that I met, and I've been to Kalamazoo a number of times. I've actually bought 2 motorcycles in Kalamazoo. I bought 2 motorcycles. One of them was, this is neither here nor there. This is why I have notes to help keep me on track. But this is a little bit of a rabbit trail. I bought two motorcycles in Kalamazoo. One was a Kawasaki KZ 1000cc motorcycle. It looked like something that you'd see the Fonz from Happy Days riding, right? As a cruiser. And it looked pretty sick. It got totaled when I got hit by a car. Guy pulled out in front of me and just took the bike out from under me. I went flying over the hood of the car. I was going about 40 miles an hour. It was literally the one day out of all my riding time on a motorcycle, the one day that I didn't wear an armored jacket. I was wearing nothing but a t-shirt because it was like 96 degrees outside, and I was like, hey, put that thing on. I was just going down the road to get some lunch on break, and lo and behold, that's when I get hit by a car. A 16-year-old boy just got his license. He was on his way to the high school to register for his classes towards the tail end of summer. Pulls out in front of me, hits the bike, takes the bike out from under me. I go over the car, 40 miles an hour. My t-shirt comes up, and I slide across the pavement of this back road with gravel and everything on my bare back. Had to go to the hospital, and I jacked up my back pretty good. It ripped a lot of the skin off my back, and I had basically gravel stones embedded in my back. They had to get rubbing alcohol and like sandpaper and scrub it out. Literally the worst pain I've ever been in my life. But I made a full recovery, and the insurance payout that I got for the accident was able to afford me a newer bike. So again, I got one from Kalamazoo. It's a Honda Magna VF 750. So anyways, so I got a bit of an upgrade in the process. So I couldn't be too bad about it. I got to spend some... Actually, I had never played the Mass Effect series. See how about these rabbit trails? I had never played the Mass Effect series, and my wife was like, I gotta do something to keep them occupied. I couldn't leave the house for like a week. I was on these painkillers that just kind of like, right? So she actually bought me Mass Effect 1 and 2, and I played through the series while I was sort of bedridden, and I fell in love with Mass Effect. So that's my story, how it relates to video games and beer. Okay, Oberon, summer beer. So we're talking about Oberon, where their headquarters are. Now this is a 5.8% ABV. It's a much lighter beer. It's supposed to be really drinkable. It's supposed to be a really summery beer. So Bell's opened in 1993. They were originally called Kalamazoo Brewing because they started in Kalamazoo. Then they kind of moved some of their brewing equipment to Comstock. They renamed it Bell's because it's a family name. Okay, so they're most known for beers like Oberon, Hop Slam, and the Bell's Two Hearted IPA. So those are some of their more notable beers that you may have heard of. Without further ado, let's try Oberon. Very drinkable. Okay, if you got an Oberon, crack it open. Let's drink it together. Very, very drinkable. Very drinkable. Tastes very summery. It's not a Bud Light, right? It's not a light lager that you can see through. It's got a lot more flavor to it. It's very citrusy. In fact, often if you were to order an Oberon on tap from somewhere, what they will do is they'll put an orange slice right on the edge of the glass, right on the rim of the glass. Some guys will even squeeze it, add a little bit of orange juice, but it's got some citrusy zest to it. Very, very drinkable. Yum. Oh. Okay, so we got 2 beers down. Dragon's Milk, New Holland Brewing Company, Oberon, Bell's Brewing. Before we get to these next two, we do a brief intermission here. We're going to talk about, I'm going to give you a little bit of a quiz. Okay, so I'm actually going to lean into chat because I want to see who knows the answers to these questions. But this is a little bit more of a beer trivia thing. Just give me 5 minutes here between beers. Okay, so wait, where did I write that down? Right here. Here are my notes for intermission. So, question number 1. Are you guys ready? We're going to test your knowledge of beer. Let's see if you can handle it. By the way, thanks everybody for hanging out with us. We've got over 100 people here for this. Cool. So here's your first quiz question. What are the 4 base ingredients or components necessary to make beer? The 4 base ingredients necessary to make beer. Think about that a second. Do you know? There are 4 things, 4 components that if you lose any one of these, you're left with something that is not beer. These are the 4 things that define beer. Now for this, I'm going to lean in. Pardon me. Oh, sweet googly moogly. I'm going to see who knows what's up. So, Danger Stick says hops, malt, crap, nope, Zen, there's no crap, mud, fingernails, malt, hops, water, and yeast. See who said that? Your name is in black. Sleazy, Chick Sleazy, congratulations. You're the first person to label list all 4. Okay? If you missed that, I'm going to put you back here. So if you missed that, the answer was water, malt, hops, yeast. Okay? Water and malt. Let me talk about malt. What is malt? What do you mean by malt? I don't know what that is. Is that like a grain? Yes. Here's what they do. They let the grain germinate. What does that mean? Well, they let it start to grow a little bit. I'm going to explain this in layman's terms. They let it start to grow a little bit. And so when the grain starts to mature, it develops all of these sugars that are used to create life. As it continues to develop, these sugars will be used to grow into, right, the plant. Here's what they do. Right at the tail end of that process where it develops all of these sugars, basically they shock it real quick to kill it. So it's created all these sugars, but they haven't been translated into organic material yet. It's just the sugars. So that's what your malt is. It's when they take something that they allow to germinate and then they kill it right before it can use all of these resources that's built up inside of itself. And then those sugars are then extracted, we'll talk about this in a second, to help create beer. Hops. What are hops? Well, hop flowers, you can research it, type it into Google. What's a hop flower? Basically, it's just what it sounds like. It's a plant, it's a flower. And that flower has a certain bitterness quality to it that when it's boiled into a beer helps translate into some really exotic flavors. And there's a wide spectrum of hops that are used to create beer. Yeast. What is yeast? You guys probably know what yeast is. You pitch yeast in things like bread. You pitch yeast in things like beer. What happens if I don't pitch the yeast? Well, you end up with sugary water that's probably a little bit bitter from the hops, but you don't get any alcohol. What yeast does is it goes in there and it feeds off all those sugars that you extracted from your malt. It feeds off all those sugars and then it sort of exhales alcohol. So it eats the sugars, exhales alcohol. That's why you don't have sugar water when you drink a beer. Okay? I'm going to scoot you back just a smidge so you can see a little bit more. Okay. So, water, malt, hops, yeast. Four main components, four main ingredients in making beer. Second question, last question. Last question to quiz you here. There's a scale used to describe a certain quality in beer called the IBU scale. What does IBU stand for, and what does it measure? So if I were to pick up a bottle here, and I were to read on the label, and it would say IBU, and then it would give me a number. What does that mean? What's it talking about? What are IBUs? Anybody know? I'm just going to read the chat here. Bitterness, ASG. Yes, that is correct. Danger Stick, International Bitterness Unit, not beer unit. Something bitterness unit. Yeah. A lot of you guys knew what we're talking about. So IBUs are the International Bitterness Unit. So let's say you don't know, let's say you want to know more about a beer. You see it on the shelf, and you're like, I want to know what this is about. So you look at the ABV, and you're like, okay, so it's a 6% ABV. Okay, so that's pretty drinkable. And you're like, I don't really like bitterness. I like stuff where the hops are really boiled long and they're boiled off so that it's left with something that's a little bit more drinkable for my palate. I don't like hoppy things. So you look at the label, it says IBUs, and it says 90. If you don't like hoppy, you're going to be like, no, that's really high. Okay, on the low end of the spectrum, you're going to want something like 8 to 15 or even 20 if you don't like hoppy stuff. Say you like hoppy stuff and you see 70, you see 80, you're going to be like, well, I might like that. Okay, so IBU, International Bitterness Unit. And that's going to give you some understanding of a beer. So lagers are generally like 8 to 12. Stouts are usually like 30 to 50. IPAs tend to be like 60 to 80. And then you get things like barley wines, which are 70 to 80 IBUs, or double IPAs, which are, like 80 to 100 IBUs. So a little bit of information for you. So I want to move on to our next two beers. Let me really quickly tell you how beer is made in layman's terms. You could do a whole class on how to make beer, and it would take hours. I'm going to give you like the 2-minute rundown, okay? And we talked on this a little bit. Sanitization is the very first thing you do when you're making beer. You got to sanitize all your equipment because one single germ could contaminate the beer and it will taste horrible. Trust me, I've done it. I've done home brewing myself. I do all grain brewing. I've done a lot of it and I've really enjoyed the process. But I've had some beers that you brew it and you go through the whole process, and 2 months later you crack it open after all this time and you're expecting it to be delicious and it tastes like poop. And you're like, well, that really sucks. Something went wrong in the sanitization process. I didn't get all my equipment clean, and for some reason the beer got contaminated and it tasted like crap. So you gotta make sure that you sanitize and clean all of your equipment. First thing that you do after that is called the mash. What is the mash? Well, they take a big something, I don't know, what depends on your scale of brewing. Some brewing facilities have mash, they call it a mash tun. It's this giant container that's like 2 stories tall. My mash tun, when I brew, is like that tall. It's like 3 feet tall, okay? So you have a mash tun. What you do is you take that malt that we talked about, where we let the malt germinate, and then we shock it basically to kill it before it can use all those sugary resources inside the plant. And then we put all that grain inside a mash tun. That mash tun is meant to keep things insulated and nice and sealed and warm, so it can't get contaminated and it's not going to lose temperature over the course of the next hour or so while you do the mash. Okay, then you're gonna pour hot water into the mash, like pretty stinking hot water. Different beers use different temperatures during the mash because you want to get all that sugar, but you don't want to kill it. You don't want to drown it out. You don't want it to be too watery at the end. You really just want to extract all that sugar, so the water is going to trickle down through all of your grain and pull out those sugars. Okay? Now, they usually do this 2 to 3 times, where they're going to let the water trickle down. They collect that water out the bottom. It's filtered, so there's no like chunks or anything, no pieces of malt. It's just sugar water. And they collect it at the bottom and they put it right back up on top and let it trickle down yet again. And you kind of do this, and not in 2 different steps. Like let it all go and then pour it back on top. Like as the water level is dropping, you're filtering it out the bottom and you just keep pouring it right on top, so it never stays dry. Okay, and then at the end of that process, you get all of your sugar water out. You collect it in some vessel of some kind. You collect it and you put it on for what's called the boil process. So now there's 2 things that happen during the boil. Now when you're boiling your beer, you're essentially trying to add the hops to it. So that's the most important thing. During the boil, hops. That's the first thing you need to know. After you've got all your sugar water, you put it onto a fire or heating vessel of some kind. You start heating that water up to a boil, and you maintain this boil at a specific temperature based on your recipe for the beer. You add your hop flowers to it. Say you want to have a stout. Well, you're going to add the hops towards the beginning of the boil because you don't want something to be super hoppy. You want to boil most of the bitterness out. But things like IPAs, sometimes they do like a 90-minute where they boil the hops for the whole time, but then they also add some at the end so that you keep some of that bitterness, right? So kind of when you add the hops will affect the flavor of the beer. So that's the boil. After that, you're going to filter it. You don't want chunky stuff. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed something. During the boil, this is the part of the process of brewing beer where you add things called adjuncts. What's an adjunct? An adjunct is anything extra you decide to toss in your beer to give it flavor, besides your 4 main ingredients, right? Water, malt, hops, and yeast. Besides those 4 things, if you're going to add anything else to the beer, it's called an adjunct. Okay, so maybe you wanted it to be a coffee stout, so you added some coffee beans there. Or maybe you wanted it to be a cherry wheat ale, so if you're going to you're going to add your cherries during the boil. Or maybe you want it to have some orange zest to it, so you put some orange peel in the boil. Or honey or something, you know what I'm saying? So anything that you add to the beer to give it some extra flavor, you do during the boil process. Then you're going to filter it, you're going to ferment it, and during the fermentation process, that's when you pitch your yeast. And it's going to turn all those sugars into alcohol, so you don't end up with sweet water at the end of the process. You actually get beer. So you pitch your yeast, you let it sit for minimum. You're looking at like 2 weeks, sometimes a year. I mean, it depends on the beer and what you're going for. So after that, you're gonna have your fermented beer. It's all ready to drink except for one thing. You need to add bubbles to it. You gotta carbonate it. So you're going to take your beer after you've aged it, you fermented it, it's all turned into alcohol, and then you're going to carbonate that beer. Some people do that via like a keg, where you basically just within a couple of minutes you can take it off the shelf where it's been fermenting, carbonate it, and drink it. Other times they do what's called bottle conditioning, where they'll basically add these sugar tablets right to you'll bottle your beer, put your tablet of sugar in there, and you'll cap it, let it sit for another week, and after a week, that tablet will have carbonated that whole beverage for you. So yeah, that's the process of making beer. Let's move on to our last 2 brews. I'm getting thirsty again. Now, we've had our Dragon Smoke, we've had our Oberon. Next thing up on the list is, this is the Dirty Bastard. This is made by Founders Brewing Company. Personally, my favorite brewing company on the planet, Founders Brewing Company. This is the Dirty Bastard. Beer Advocate rates it at 90, which is an outstanding beer. So this is an outstanding. This is rated 90 out of 100 on Beer Advocate. Very good beer. It's a Scotch ale. Okay, it's a Scotch ale. So here's the commercial description of the beer, so you know what it's going to taste like, what you're getting into here. Here we go. So good, it's almost wrong. Dark ruby in color and brewed with 7 varieties of imported malts. Complex in finish with hints of smoke and peat. Put a pin in it. We're going to talk about peat when I get to the end of the description. Paired with a malty richness and a right hook of hop power to give it the bad attitude that a beer named Dirty Bastard has to live up to. Ain't for the wee lads. End description. Well, what the heck is peat? Sounds like a dude. Did they boil a dude into the beer? His name was Pete? No, P-E-A-T, peat. It's used most notably in the distilling of whiskey or scotch. Peat is basically a soil with some broken down veggies, broken down organic material, right? Vegetation in it. And then you heat it and you get this smoke that rises off of it, and they use it to basically, Brooks says Scotch ales are my undisputed favorite. If you haven't had Dirty Bastard, you're going to like it. So they basically heat it to get this smoke off of the peat, okay, and that's how they end up germinating. They stop the germination of their malts in things like whiskeys and scotches. So that's what peat is. Okay, so this is an 8.5% ABV, so it's not as hefty as the Dragon's Milk. Let me let you see. This is the Dirty Bastard. This is the Dragon's Milk. You can compare color and clarity here. So this has a nice little head on it, and it's sort of this reddish color, this amberish color. Okay, it's a very good-looking beer to look at. About the brewer, this is my favorite brewing company on the planet, Founders Brewing Company. They have several 90-plus Beer Advocate rated beers in their repertoire. Okay, in 1997 they were founded. They were the Canal Street Brewing Company. They ended up changing their name to Founders Brewing, but they are in downtown Grand Rapids, very close to where I live, which is sort of a dangerous thing, to be honest. But they're actually expanding so they can double their production because their demand is so high right now because they have so many excellent beers, but they're a microbrewery, so keeping up with that demand. So they're going to expand and double their production. They have beers like KBS, which you've probably heard me talk about on stream. You've probably even seen me hold up the bottle that I'm aging on stream. So KBS, it's their Kentucky Breakfast Stout. It's rated 100 on a scale to 100. It is a world-class beer. KBS was actually voted and rated among the top 10 beers in the world. And it was voted 4th best beer in the world last year. 4th best beer in the world. That is no small feat. Now, I have had KBS several times this year. It's a seasonal, but where we are right now in the season, I can't buy it. I couldn't go out today and get a bottle of KBS. There's literally nowhere I could go that would have it unless I tried to find somebody who's got a bottle aging in their basement and then offer them $20 for a bottle to get. I couldn't do that today. But you guys have seen me show you the bottle of KBS before. So we're doing one of their really excellent beers instead, the Dirty Bastard, the Scotch Ale. So most known beers that they have are things like the Dirty Bastard, KBS, All Day IPA, you've probably seen, which is a very drinkable IPA, and then their Breakfast Stout, which is fantastic. So without any further ado, let's try this here, the Dirty Bastard. That's quite tasty. It's quite tasty. This is not like an Oberon. It's not summery and drinkable. You throwing a few back by the pool. This carries some weight. It has a lot of complexity to it. So you can definitely taste that roasty maltiness, but there's also a very hoppy quality about it for a Scotch ale. So they've got 7 different imported malts in this beer, so it's very, very complex. Now, getting a beer like that right is very difficult to do because when you add that many malts, then there's so many more variables that you have to get right. If you screw it up, if you get it too hot, then 2 of your 7 malts are going to be unusable. They're not going to get any flavor out of it. You know what I mean? So you really have to nail it right in the mash process to get this beer to even be good or to be different than something that was made with 3 malts. You know what I mean? So to get this right is quite a feat to accomplish. They did it. Founders did it. They did it right with this recipe, getting a score of 90 from Beer Advocate. Outstanding beer. I'm going to have another swig before we move on. Let me show you the label if you ever want to try and find some dirty bastard, okay? So this is what you're looking for. Yeah, this one right here. Dirty bastard. Right there. I see someone just joined. Thank you so much for being Yeah, I'm gonna scroll up. I gotta see who you were. Oh, your name is like dark. It's so hard to read. I don't know. I can't see your name. Either way, thank you so much for joining the Stream fam again for that resub. Very much appreciated nonetheless. So, I am, by the way, going to go and rewatch this whole thing so I can see who said what. It's kind of hard to read chat from this far away, but I'm going to have another sip. Okay, moving on. Our last beer before we sign off for the day. This is our last one. Get your giggles out, kids. I know it's super funny. Let me turn this a little bit. This one is the Big Red Coq. COQ. Okay, COQ. It's a rooster. It's a name for a rooster. Calm down, people. So, this is from Brewery Vivant. They're a relatively younger brewer. Now, they can. Let me just tell you something real quick. This is the label for the Big Red Coq. Okay, you can see I'm not lying about the spelling there, okay? Yum-o. Let me tell you something about Brewery Vivant and about canning in particular. So a lot of people are turned off by beers in cans. Let me tell you why you shouldn't do that. It used to be this odd stigma that a beer in a can wasn't worth drinking, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So there are a lot of advantages to canning a beer as opposed to bottling a beer. One of them is sort of the eco-friendly recyclability of these cans and reusability of them. Two, let me just tell you, if it's not a beer that needs to sit on the shelf for 2-3 years, you will actually have zero change in the flavor and quality of that beer if you put it in a bottle as opposed to a can. There's going to be no change in the taste and no change in the quality. Nothing will change between a bottle and a can if it's not going to sit on the shelf for years. Nothing's going to change. Do not be turned off by a beer in a can. In fact, there are some phenomenal beers that are actually rated outstanding, even to world-class beers out there that are canned and not bottled. Never be turned off by a beer that's in a can, because that's certainly not a reason. Especially things that are like red ales, IPAs, stuff like that. There's no point. There's absolutely no advantage to bottling it. It's just a different way. It's just different. It's not bad. It's not worse. So that being said, Big Red Coq by Brewery Vivant. Fantastic beer. This is actually the very first beer I ever had from Brewery Vivant, and it turned me on to them. I was like, I gotta have more of their stuff now. This is excellent. Relatively young brewer. They're in Grand Rapids. Let me tell you about the beer itself first, then we'll talk about the brewer. So this is rated 87 on Beer Advocate. For a young brewer, that's really impressive. To get into that very good category of beers is quite the accomplishment. So it is a hoppy Belgian-American red ale. Now, I noted this early in the stream when we first kind of gave you the list of beers here. So one of the things that Brewery Vivant is all about is sort of taking a French or Belgian spin on all the beers that they do. So whether it's a pale ale, whether it's a red ale, things that aren't necessarily notably Belgian or notably French, they give a sort of French or Belgian twist to it, which is a very interesting process. And they do it well. Some of the beers are a little interesting because of it. They're sort of unique. But this is one of the beers that they nailed. They actually got this really, really right in the process. I think you might hear my baby. I think she's waking up from her nap. But don't worry. She's got mom here. She will be taken care of. So I'm not neglecting my child in the background. Don't worry about that. But anyway, so Big Red Coq. Let me read you the label description here. It's a long one, so I didn't want to write it down by hand onto my notes. But I'm going to read you the description here. Belgian American Red Ale. This beer was named after the red rooster from our logo and from the Wallonia region of Belgium. The deep red hue comes from the crystal malts in the mash. It lends the beer the backbone it needs to stand up to the excessive hop charges the brewers throw into the kettle. It's the Citra hops That's a certain variety of hop flower. It's the Citra hops that provide the mango tropical fruit citrusy flavor that makes this beer so unique. Citra hops is a type of hop flower. So there's the description for you, so you sort of know ahead of time about what this is going to taste like, okay? So it's a 6.5% ABV. Now, this Brewery Vivant, they're down on Cherry Street in downtown Grand Rapids. They're located in an old church, so you walk in there and you actually see the bar. It's actually where the old pulpit was. Okay, it was stained glass. It's got a lot of character to it. The food is exceptional. They have a chorizo and oyster dish that is absolutely phenomenal. Very, very good food there. I highly recommend that you check it out sometime if you're ever in West Michigan. Brewery Vivant. Okay, so they, like I've said, they have sort of, their vision is to have French and Belgian inspirations behind their brews. So because of that, their saisons are exceptional. They've got a great farmhand beer as well. They're really, really good. And their Belgian style beers, you got like the Undertaker, some great brews that you should definitely check out. They try to use as many local ingredients as possible, which is another plus. And last thing I'll say about Vivant is that the name Vivant is behind their vision. That's why they adopted the name. That means to be alive. So vivant, bon vivant means the good life. Vivant means to be alive, to be lively. So that's sort of the inspiration behind their brewing process. So, without any further ado, let's try the Big Red Coq. Definitely hoppy. You can see in the clarity that it's a little bit cloudy for a red, just moderately. That's sort of the Belgian twist behind it. Typically, red ale would be high on the clarity spectrum. You'd be able to see, right through it. You see that? You'd typically be able to see right through it, but it's a little bit cloudy. That's because of the Belgian inspiration behind the beer. Very, very good. So, in retrospect, just a recap here. So the beers that we tried today, 4 different beers from 4 different brewers. We started out with the New Holland Brewing Company Dragon's Milk. That's an 11% ABV. It's pretty hefty, quite creamy, very, very good imperial stout, aged in oak barrels. We then moved on to something really summery, very drinkable. You may actually look for this summer as you're hanging out with your family, doing your grilling, doing your swimming. It's called Oberon. It's an American wheat ale made by Bell's Brewing Company. We followed that up with Founders Brewing Company Dirty Bastard. Okay? That's a Scotch ale. It's delicious. Please try and find these. And the last thing that we finished off with was Brewery Vivant Big Red Coq. Okay, and that's a Belgio-American red ale. So, I would highly recommend that you guys try and find some local places where you can maybe swing by and grab any of these 4 beers. Pick them up. Tell me what you think about them. I'm actually going to post this whole stream. I'm going to take it straight out of Twitch. I'm going to upload it on YouTube for the people that didn't get to watch it. And in the comment section of that video, if you'd stop by, tell me if you've tried these. Tell me what you thought. And also give me some feedback on if you liked this segment today where we tried all 4 of these beers. We showed you the color, the clarity, the quality. We tasted them. We described them. Told you about the brewer, where they're from, what they're about. Let me know if you liked that. And maybe some suggestions you would have. So for the next time we do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tweet out a list in advance of all the beers we're going to try. This is my baby girl. All the beers we're going to try. So you can actually go out, you can get these beers before we do the stream, and then you can sit down with me live on stream, and you can have your own flight ready to go. You can taste right along with me, understand more about the brewer, the process of making that beer, its flavor, all together with me, and we can chat about it together. So I'm going to take 2 seconds. I'm going to pull this in right here. I want to see what you guys are saying. Can you order this stuff? That's a great question. Yes, you can. There are online distributors that you can order specific beers. You can have them delivered straight to your house. You will have to sign for them. So it's not something you can order and just have it come to your house while you're at work. You will have to be present. You will have to be the person on the label in order to sign for that alcoholic beverage. So definitely do that. We will do this again. We'll do some more Michigan beers. There are lots of breweries around here that I want to highlight and beers I want to highlight. Then we'll move on. We'll do some other stuff around the States as well if this goes over well. So thank you so much, everyone, for stopping by. We'll catch you next time. Hope you have a great day. Now I'm going to sit here awkwardly for a few seconds because I don't want to sign off the stream too soon that you miss my sign out. Give it a few seconds. Give it a few seconds. Give it a few seconds. I like the brew Vanguard.